Hello everyone, I am Duke and welcome to episode 1 of the FeelNoPaint podcast, and today I am joined by one of the creative minds behind one of Games Workshop's most beloved games, Mordheim and Warhammer 6th edition. He's moved on to the indie game Trench Crusade, and that has blown up in popularity recently. I'm still quite baffled as to why he's agreed to join me today, but I do thank him for that. So please welcome the prophet himself, Mr. Tuomas Pirinen. And with enough from me, I'll pass over to you, Thomas. Could you please give us a brief introduction to yourself, what you've worked on in the past for people that may not be familiar with your work, and also a little bit about what you're doing now?
Well, pleasure to be here. I am Tuomas Pirinen, and I have been a game designer for a better part of 29 years now. The tabletop fans will know me best from the tabletop game Mordheim, Warhammer Fantasy Battles 6th edition, my work on the 5th edition. I wrote the Warhammer Siege, the Warhammer Realm of Chaos for the 5th edition, great many other army books, campaign packs, countless White Dwarf articles. And the after that, I've been working in the video game industry for a better part of 2 decades, working on places like Remedy, PlayStation, Microsoft Game Studios, Ubisoft, Electronic Arts, many others. Founded several of my own companies, and most recently, tabletop fans are probably listening to this because of the tabletop game that I wrote called Trench Crusade.
Mm-hmm. So, can you tell us a little bit about how sort of Trench Crusade came around? How did you and Mike start working together on it?
Oh, Mike and James, who had done a tiny little Kickstarter on a few miniatures, and Mike, of course, had been working on the visual development of the Trench Crusade for years. They contacted me. Basically, they wanted to do a game. Obviously, neither one of them is a game designer, and their favorite game of all time on tabletop space is Mordheim. So they contacted me. Now, I get contacted a lot by a lot of people asking me to design games, a lot of indie companies. I pretty much always say no because it isn't just jiving with me, and also it's a lot of work to make a tabletop game, usually for very little gain. I have a family to feed. But with Trench Crusade, I really looked at the art Mike had done, and it got my imagination going, and I thought that I can work with this. This is worthwhile. I'm enjoying. I see that I could have a similar relationship that I had with John Blanche at the Games Workshop with Mike. Mm-hmm. And I asked him that, right, if I'm gonna do it, you do realize that all the time and money we're gonna put down, we are gonna lose it all, because this is exactly the kind of game that there is absolutely no financial sense to do. If you're okay with that, I mean. And Mike said, yep. 100% okay with losing everything. And I said, okay, I can work with you. And then we spent 2 years working on it. So that's from my point of view, beginning of Trench Crusade. Obviously, Mike had done a visual and lore development of from the artist's point of view for several years before that.
It's sort of one of those, it seems like it was a high risk, high reward thing. You could lose quite a lot on it. You could invest a lot of time and not much could come of it, or it could be, what seems to be the massive success that it is becoming. I mean, I think there was, I can't remember how many thousands of backers, but it was a few million raised, and 5.5 was it for the Kickstarter just gone?
We are over 6 million now in all told, over 30,000 backer. But also now that since we have already honored our digital pledges, people are buying a hell of a lot of STLs on My Mini Factory. So the number is revised every day, but we are well beyond 6 million now, and really we have a good problem that we have more demand than we have supply right now. We are working on fixing, but I would say your assessment, this was high risk, no reward, was the right assessment. Like, it's the same thing when people ask me, how do you get a job in games industry? How did you do it? And I said, well, I can tell you how I got it, but how it went about with me never happens. So you can't be the plan your career in the same way. In the same way, I'd say that trying to do Trench Crusade again now, I don't know how the stars aligned that it became a success. It's and there's been many theories. I have my own. but I think it's a little bit of that lightning in the bottle that I don't think it's a formula you can follow.
Do you want to talk about sort of one of your theories as to why you think Trench Crusade might have taken off in the way that it has?
Yeah. Well, the mainstream gaming space on tabletop has become very mainstream. It's gone very much to the maximize the shareholder value. So then you don't want to take creative risks. You don't want to be subversive. You don't want to be controversial in any way, shape, or form. You want to be safe. You want to be mainstream. You want to file out rough edges that the D&D or Magic the Gathering or the Warhammer had originally, which makes perfect sense. These are huge companies on the stock market who have a legal mandate to maximize the shareholder value by hook or crook. Doing sort of subversive punk flavored gaming just doesn't make any sense. But it did leave the big opening for us. I think that there is a fair chunk of people who enjoy a bit more out there in their gaming space, and they like a bit more mature content, a stuff that makes you think a bit more, and I think the setting selection really worked. World War I is underused. It has all these nations that we recognize where we live in today, and yet it was this weird time when you had a cavalry with lances and armor charging tanks, and there were planes and zeppelins and poison gas. It was this, and it's never been like that again. Like, it was a very, very unusual time. Napoleonics and medieval meets industrial age. You blend that in with the like religious, I won't say extremism, but the Trench Crusade world, the divine powers are much more present and active. They are integral part of the setting, but they are still set in our world. So people have natural affinity. Because if I say to you that there is a moving fortress of Britannia, that already means something to you. I don't have to explain you what Britannia is. That already is synopsis. So I think the combination of those things, putting out the rules free very early, and that people actually gravitated and started playing. And one thing that I think is a big part is that we said from the beginning, miniature agnostic, we encourage proxies, kit bashing, conversions. We welcome them. We are never going to enforce in any way, shape, or form any rules on what miniatures you can use. And there are a lot of people who now on the mainstream games where it's not allowed. You just can't build your own scenery and terrain and miniatures. There are a lot of creative people who miss that, like I do. And Trench Crusade is built from scratch to support that. It does mean that the maybe our financial potential is less, but then again, since the game was never envisaged to be as successful as it became, it's we rather thought, let's make the game that we actually want to make rather than try to come up with ways to squeeze money from people.
I guess that's one of the things, that if you make a game that, you as people who've been immersed in this scene for so long actually want to play, there's a solid chance that other people also do. So you might be right or wrong necessarily in your assessment of where that ceiling of your earning potential is, but there is one there, and it's because, as you say, there's this big creative aspect of Trench Crusade that I think is lacking in some of the war games now, and how they do have to be, for the larger war games, have to be a little bit more marketable, palatable, and wider audience reaching. But I think Trench Crusade sort of hits on that wider audience from a different angle because of how inclusive it is of almost every culture. I mean, Trench Crusade itself is a true world war in a way that our own world war wasn't, because it's the war for creation. So every nation on Earth has a say in this fight, and every nation on Earth has been probably far more affected by it than our own World War One. And so there's that much harder scope.
Oh yeah, I mean, there is also there are fascinating cultures with rich histories, both military and the artistic. in the Middle East, in Africa, which brought into the Trench Crusade, like the Abyssinians, the Iron Sultanate, which again, like a mainstream gaming company, just wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot barge pole. It's which again, I understand risk aversiveness is important when you are responsible to your shareholders. Luckily, we have no shareholders, but I found just the Ethiopian, the Solomonic throne, their history, their art, their military traditions, incredibly fascinating and inspiring. And there's so much in the Middle Eastern cultures that and their military traditions and their stories and mythology that is really, really just as thrilling to me as the European Western one. So to me, this is like I'm like a kid in a candy store, that all this candy's been left for me because nobody else dares to touch it.
I think that sounds like it's one of the things that draws a lot of people to Trench Crusade as well. And speaking of the amount of people that it's drawn to the game, we have some viewer questions, and as we spoke about briefly as well, a couple of different theories and things that I'd like to put forward to you today. So would you like to get started on those?
Please, hit me.
Well, the first one is, can you tell us a little bit about the map? How is that coming along? Is it sort of nearing readiness, or do you have a timescale of when it might be coming out? If it's, still in development, I understand if you might not be able to say certain things, but any hints on the map?
So the map is drawn by a very, very talented cartographer who's done a lot of the very important fantasy maps for many companies, Jared Blando. It is drawn, done. We are making a minor adjustments. We've also, they hired several Latin experts, because there are many plates that they talk about the world. But of course, the Trench Crusade universe, this would be written in either Sabir, which nobody speaks anymore, which was the original lingua franca of the Crusades, or in late medieval Latin. So we went for that. So we got a bunch of Latin experts. So they are putting finishing touches on the Latin. We are trying out the layout. It'll be super fun getting the fans. They'll start obviously translating the Latin and finding out the little Easter eggs and secrets we've put in there. The map is done. We are thinking of doing a little bit of a reveal, maybe in one of the major cons very soon. It's watch this space. So the map is done. And we had, like, the map was done in a sketch fashion, like in not presentable fashion of something like a graphic artist would do a long time ago. We had a good idea already of the world. Where does the Great Iron Wall lie? What are the borders of the Free State of Prussia, and so on and so forth? But we didn't want to present the fans with half-assed looking art. So for somebody like Jared, who is a true professional and artist, it does take a while to make a really gorgeous map.
Yeah, I can understand that, and I think also from the point of view of writing the lore, even that initial steps that you had probably helped to a massive degree of grounding it for yourselves and going, okay, well, this is where we are for this story, or this is where we are for this element of the timeline, and it gives you a proper grounding for that story to move forward. And I think something like maps and things like that are quite crucially important to large scale world building. I think that getting that map early in, or early into the journey of Trench Crusade, is going to be quite interesting. I am looking forward to it myself.
Yeah. I mean, what Tolkien said, when they asked him about how he created Middle Earth, his first comment was, "Luckily, I started with a map."
Yeah, and I think it's very true, isn't it? That if you start from a basic and the ground of a thing, you can build on it. If you try and go in the highest elements of it, you've lost that foundation early, and it's hard to put it back in once you've moved too far ahead. So I think it's a pretty good stroke to start with that. So I noticed in another podcast you mentioned that you had written part of the timeline. So are there any real life events or historical events that you haven't as of yet put into Trench Crusade, but you'd like to adapt into it, and how might they be different sort of historical characters or historical events to how they are in our real world.
Yep. There will be we are working on the physical rulebook now, which will have a new version of the timeline, which added events and the little snippets of info. I tried to not to go overboard using people from our real world history because it's a little bit cheap trick. I wanted couple because of my personal affiliation with them, but I also thought that quite a few people in our history, they were never born or they had a very different life. But one historic character I will put into the Trench Crusade lore is the Red Baron, is the Freiherren Manfred Richtenhoven, because I just can't resist this. His story is so awesome. And I totally see him fighting in the Air Force of the Free State of Prussia. Is the against the Northern heretics.
Mm-hmm. So that actually brings me on to another question, which I wasn't going to go on to just yet, but sort of whose idea was it for Trench Crusade to be a skirmish game, and how did the game system come about? And beyond that, is there plans for either a wider tabletop game like a large scale battle game, or are you going to branch off into something like naval combat or even dogfight in World War One air battle?
Yeah. So we talked a fair bit in the beginning, but there was a lot of limiting factors, like doing a miniature range for a full war game. We'd still be working on that, and it would have cost a lot of money. I mean, even as it was now, this was a big personal investment from the founders to get the miniature range, because we wanted to release the game that there are models for every faction. And that is not an insignificant the investment for a couple of guys. Remember, there was no investors or companies behind us. This is all from our own pocket. So the skirmish made sense. Mordheim was the inspiration that really got Mike and James to contact me in the first place. And I also think that the skirmish is a good place to start. Skirmish is a great for the fan base, because you don't have to spend so much money on the miniatures. It's much easier to play through a game or set up the terrain. You can play several games per gaming night, which can be super fun when you're playing campaign. But the extend it further in the future, I mean, absolutely, we would love to do stuff. Full battle game, have to not promise anything there, because that is a very serious commitment. And you also then have to question that we obviously want to help retail stores, is the friendly local indie gaming stores. But having to take a range of entire another battle game on top of what the Games Workshop provides you're asking a lot. Your sales have to be gigantic to justify it. And that would be a big ask. So I am not thinking about that right now. Also because we still have plenty we want to do in the current game. But the rules were really a culmination of a lot of ideas I had. There is homage to Mordheim. Mordheim players will recognize things. And there were several innovations in the design that I've been really working for a long time in my mind, like the open turn order. How do I deal with double move and the system of the blood markers and blessing markers?
Yeah, that was a thing I was going to ask about. So what brought you to the system of blood and blessing markers? Because I know you've spoken on, I think it was a Jokes podcast, about removing stats from the overall stat block, because you're quite a fan of a big stat block, having been a DM for a D&D campaign that's been running for about 20 years, did you say? Then, so how did that condensing down and making the game run off of essentially 2 tables and a couple of stats sort of come about when you've come from games where there are large stat blocks and huge rule sets?
I mean, it's the answer is simple. It's very difficult to get people to even try another game. They've invested a lot in the games that are already out there. They're entrenched. They spend money on their models. So the more complex your rules are, I am not saying deep. Deep is different than complex. But the more complex your rules are, the more obstacles you are putting in the way of the players. So condensing it the game system to 2 roles, condensing stats into 4 stats, and then making conscious decision that it's not about maths. The game runs on dice pools, apart from armor. Armor is the one exception. The game runs on dice pools, which require you to do no maths. You just need to know how many dice you pick, and do you pick the highest or the 2 highest or the 2 lowest out of the bunch, which makes it much more approachable. And more crucially, it doesn't compromise the depth.
I think that's one of the things that drew me to Trench Crusade, because I've come from about 22, 23 years or so of playing Warhammer 40,000. I had a couple of years off from that. And 40k is a huge rule set, so many rules to it. I played 6 armies in the game, and so I'm entrenched in the rules of those. But then coming into Trench Crusade was such a refreshing change to go, okay, well, all I need to do is this and this, and here's a couple of stats. And like you say, armor is the only thing that is a big modifier to a lot of things, because it's all works off the dice pools. And yeah, it's a really refreshing little system that I've really enjoyed playing, and our local campaigns taking off in quite a good way, and we're all having quite a lot of fun with it. So thank you for a quite intuitive and quick to learn game system. And
one would hope after 30 years I'd learn something about game design.
Well, you'd think so, yeah. But yeah, so that was all I was going to really say on that. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is, I mentioned to you a little bit in some of our messages about the layers of hell and then borrowing from Dante's Inferno. So my theory is that the Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent, as there are 7 serpents, rule from layer 2 to 8. And the Limbo is on layer 1, and that is actually the earthly plane around Jerusalem and where the heretic legions are. And then my theory is that layer 9 is where the Temple of Metamorphosis and the doorway are. Now, I know that might be going into a couple of spoiler territories for things coming up, but can you comment a little bit about on how Hell's set up and sort of who rules where, or if you don't know it all, or it's still in the works, can we talk a little bit about that for a sec?
So first off, I mean, Dante's poem is one of the most magnificent works in human artistry ever, but it's also important to remember it is a very, very much Italian political propaganda as well, where all the Dante's enemies are suffering and the political enemies are suffering, and it's very heavily based on the understanding of the Italian history at that time. So us basing our work too heavily on it beyond the conceptual level, you can't read Dante's Inferno and make one-on-one inferences with Trench Crusade. We do have a sort of a high-level idea that there are 7 layers that are dedicated to the 7 deadly sins, leaving us 2 more. It's the for other purposes. We know, for example, in which layer the hell factories are, where is Mammon's kingdom, where does what layer does the Beelzebub rule, and which deadly sin they are associated with. But we haven't, for example, drawn a full map of hell. And I think that that deserves a supplement of its own. We shouldn't rush that. We also want to keep I'm not going to reveal everything that we've even decided to do so far. I think a little bit of a mystery about a plane where literally only paladins from our side can even visit is that we don't want to reveal too much, at least not too early.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So talking a little bit for a second on sort of how Trench Crusade borrows from the real world, how have you found it navigating and adapting such major real world religions into the setting and doing that in a way that isn't going to be inflammatory to some of them, or a careful balance into the game setting?
Yeah, well, I'm not afraid of the sort of if I think that it's creatively worthwhile. If somebody gets upset, then so be it. Surprisingly, almost nobody has been. I mean, we have a a great deal of people with various positions on faith. We have strong Catholic gaming community. We have the devout Muslims. We have obviously a large number of agnostic and atheistic people. We have people of every kind of color and creed. I have a lot of people asking me about the Hebrew Knights because we have people from the Jewish background who would like to get their own force in. I think that the fact that we take faith within the sort of the grimdark universe, we take faith seriously rather than the making it it's important thing in the Trench Crusade universe. It's not a one-off thing. And we have our rule is that the don't slander, don't pander. And since we are never ever going to say what we think is the spiritual truth, like how should you approach faith in real life? I'm not a priest, I'm not a rabbi, I am not a mullah, I'm a game designer. So it's important that there is enough room for imagination of the players, that they can build a kind of force that they can identify with and have fun with. Whatever it presents like their view maybe on the faith on a high level, or they get to play like the most evil possible thing that's against their faith, or anything in between. I've had pretty much zero pushback. I think partly it is because people recognize that we do research. We try to represent the lore from the point of view that we take our writing like seriously, as in we want to provide you with quality stuff. Will you agree with our sorry, because it's not our. Will you agree with the fictional religious dogmas and views in the game? Most likely not. But everybody should realize it's a work of fiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I've noticed a couple of the Reddit threads and the Facebook groups how people are so engaged in the Trench Crusades picked up on a small part of their religious background, or a small part of the religious lore, and how maybe they don't agree with it, and maybe they don't agree with that part of that religion, but it's the fact that someone's taken the care and the time to look into that thing and delve into the religion rather than just going, here's the absolute faith value of it, and this is what it is. It's clear that you guys have taken a time and a care to research a lot of things. I think that's really resonating with a lot of people. And when
I think the proof is in the pudding.
I guess that if we hadn't, then I don't think we'd have all these fans. Cause every morning I wake up and I'm stunned by the continuous growth of the communities, and not just the numbers, but the engagement and the number of videos, the lore videos, the fan works, the models, the fiction and the fan fiction people write the fan art. Clearly, we found something that resonates with people, which is really what you want to do as a creative and a game maker.
Yeah. So I'd like to move on now to, if we can, any hints at any upcoming factions, and how many factions can the game actually support? I mean, I've got a couple of theories on what the 6 factions that I think might be coming are, because I believe I've heard you in the past talk about the game being able to support 12 major factions, then some sub-factions, but yeah, can we talk a little bit about what might be upcoming, if that's all right with you?
Yeah. So in my past work in creating like a faction-based games, I found that anything after 8 becomes really difficult to make factions that have their own unique play style and flavor, and they feel genuinely different to play. And beyond 12, because the problem comes, the more factions you have, you add even one new unit type that has anything new about it. You have to check with all the factions that does it break something, does it invalidate something, does it complete the upend the balance. And every time you add a new thing, it's this becomes more and more difficult. Imagine yourself as a juggler. Now, 2 balls, probably quite easy. 3 balls, yeah, still easy. 4, 5, 6. And then it starts getting 7, 8, 9. You get into a situation where no matter how good you are in juggling, that you can't keep all the balls in the air. This has been a big fall down for many games, collectible card games, it's the war games, that you simply either they become very blunt, that they are just the same faction basically, or you just break the meta and one of the factions becomes overpowering, or the other becomes so useless nobody plays with it. So so I do have to be careful. But what I found is that the people really like the sub factions. So they really find that the especially the new Antioch ones, that the people really enjoy. It's a twist to the basic formula on that sort of brings the flavor and character and the way of war of a real world nation like a Scotland or Ireland, for example. And the without me having to write an entire new faction. So I think this will go forward. Of the new factions we'd like to do once the rulebook is all shipped and we are happy with the core 6 and their sub factions, we definitely want to do the Hebrew Knights. We really want to do the Synod of Strategic Prophecy. And one of the really strong ones that they say contender is the Crusading Knights, because they have a lore that we find appealing. On the evil side, definitely the Temple of Metamorphosis, the Path of the Beast. I mean, our real problem really is that we have so many things that are very evocative that we'd like to do, that I could probably write law-wise 30 factions, but making a game where there is 30 factions that all work and are in at least somewhat balanced and don't overtax the memory of the players, I don't know how possible that is.
No, I think that'd be. I think that's one of the problems that are in, like you say, some of the larger war games, like let's take Games Workshop, for example, all the Warhammer edition. Every edition I hear that this army's broken, this arm's broken, this is broken the meta this time. And you do get this big sort of ebb and flow of the one faction becomes dominant for a couple of months, then they get a balance, and then something else comes. And I think it almost lends itself to that because there are too many factions and they have to keep refreshing the rules so much. Whereas, you know, keeping it small, like you were saying with Trench Crusade, is that you'll be able to go with those sub factions, but you won't have a game breaking thing that faction's going to do, because every sub faction comes with its drawbacks and its benefits for leaning into it. I mean, I like to play the Papal States Intervention Forces because of how I can, you know, manipulate turn orders a bit better with the cross that you get from the Pope, and, you know, how you can basically start campaigns with a lot of mercenaries and powerful units. Thing is, I lose out on trench malls and stuff like that, and I lose the advanced positioning that normal New Antioch get. I also really like the Procession of Sacred Affliction, because who doesn't like pilgrims running at things with tank hammers? I find them incredibly funny that they just run at things and go, no, we don't need the caparotes. We're just going to take out that demon because that's all we need. And yeah, like those little bits of flavor to the sub faction do change a lot about how they play and change a lot about how the sub faction feels, but they're still bound by the main faction rules, so they're not too divergent and too game breaking to have. I quite like that, and I'd love to see more upcoming factions. I was thinking about the Hebrew Knights and the Crusader Orders. I was thinking, would the Crusader Orders be something that would be like maybe the main faction? The Hebrew Knights would be a sub-faction of those, because then we could also see the Order of the Dragon in Wallachia, and maybe I think it's Vampire Hussars that Mike has teased in his artworks and things. I really like to see them in the game, and also Saint Dominica of the Zweihander. If she gets an order of tank splitter sword wielding mechanized knights, that'd be quite cool.
I mean, we do want to we need a base knightly order faction, simply because there is so much incredible lore and history that is tied to knights, and not just in Europe, but I mean, as you know, the Faris are the knights of the Islam who were in their history are have just as high stature and have just as many stories as we have our own knights. There is then like you said, the Order of Dragon. I think that the Hebrew Knights deserve their own faction simply because it's one of the three major Abrahamic religions. So I think that within the universe of the Trench Crusade, because of course their numbers will be smaller because of historical reasons, but I think they are so important to the myth and lore and the foundational work, because it's the OG, isn't it? It's the Judaism. So the Hebrew Knights, I think, require their own faction. Plus, I am working on the Golem rules. I just posted the playtest rules on Discord for the Scripture Guardian, which has the first draft of the Golem rules. So because it's a Golem created by Kabbalistic magic. So well, they wouldn't call it magic anyway. So I think that they deserve their own faction. You gotta tip your hat to the sort of the source of the Abrahamic religion, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that will be quite nice to see. Like you say, the rounding out of the three major Abrahamic religions. I didn't notice that you posted that stuff to the Discord, so I'll have to check that out soon. I've been waiting for Scripture Guardian lore and rules, so I'll probably make a video about that later on. Before we move on from that, speaking about the knight, in my campaign group, a friend of mine wrote some rules for a weapon serve that's a little bit like the ammo mod. And her idea was that they are a huge ducats investment, so you pay for the serf and then you pay for all the weapons that the serf carry. And the knight can swap out weapons with that serf. So if you need a tank hammer to deal with a big threat, you do an action, you swap out the weapon, get bonuses for swapping it out, and you always have to keep changing the weapon to keep those benefits. But if the serf dies, you've lost all the weapons in the campaign because they just killed out of the game. And I think, although maybe that might not be coming for the game, it will be really nice to see how the Crusader Orders, the Hebrew Knights play, and what support characters like the Wretched for the Court and like the Azeds and Yeoman and things, what support characters they get, because I imagine that the Knights themselves would be quite a powerful unit and quite a damaging unit and hard to take down, but they'll need chaff. So yeah, I'm interested to see what they get to that and how that balances out against the faction. So speaking about the upcoming things, a couple of people have reached out to me to talk about Westphalia Games and how the Red Brigade Kickstarter's, being quite successful. It's nearing its finalization now. Has the Red Brigade been a thing that had been sort of planned from the start, or was it a thing that Westphalia had kicking around and it's been adapted into Trench Crusade? Can you talk a little bit about how that came around?
Oh yeah, they were inspired about Trench Crusade, and they made of another model that they were making. They modified it to fit Trench Crusade, and it became hugely viral. And we just saw it, and we get talking. I love Westphalia. I think they are incredibly talented. Their sculpting is so top notch. Like, they are just the kind of people I like to work with. So we just started throwing ideas, and they did a draft of what the warband could be like. I then wrote the lore, and then I wrote the rules. So it was very organic how it happened. But that is how we do everything. Like the trench ghosts, we didn't come up with them. There is a chap who is my friend and the friends of John Blanche's, Harry, who just made a Heretic Legion conversion, made trench ghosts. And I was so inspired by his the kit bashing that I wrote the rules and the lore for the trench ghosts. So that came from the community, because the idea was so good and execution was so excellent that I was just inspired, and I put it into the lore. And I think the trench ghosts, looking back, fit the game and the lore perfectly. But we didn't come up with that. That was the community. So there was similar-ish vein with Westphalia, but there we were lucky that they were also a miniature manufacturer, so they could actually do the sculpting as well.
Is that sort of how it's also come about with Creature Caster as well? Because they've been hinting at things coming up with Trench Crusade, and can you comment on that? That I mentioned to you before that I think it will be a hell aligned one in complement to the Westphalia one that was heaven aligned. Could this be where we start to see the first hints of the Path of the Beast or Temple of Metamorphosis, or is that not something you can comment on?
Those ones I'm afraid is the Mike wants to do the visual development from the scratch himself, which I totally get. Remember, he's poured now 9 years of his life into this, and the some of the ideas that he came up with is including the path and the temple. I totally get it. He wants to own them, which is he's absolutely entitled to. No, this will be something else. It is hell aligned. It is a something that's been a bit more served, but again, it's very similar. That Creature Caster are very talented. They have great artists. They have great sculptors. They are real hobbyists. They are the kind of people we like to work with that are they do world-class work. I mean, I've been super happy that Westphalia was so successful because it means that their studio now has a little bit of a financial breathing space, and they can plan up for the future. I am dead chuffed about that. This is exactly the kind of stuff I want to achieve. There are so many talented indie shops that unfortunately don't get the visibility I think they deserve. So if we can give an opportunity to some, and at the same time is to build the Trench Crusade universe with them, and I'm super happy.
Is that why you've chosen to work with, because it seems to me like you're working with different developers or different sculptor groups for different factions and things? It seems like Westphalia working on a Red Brigade and whatever. Now I'm sure Creature Caster have got something horrible looking to come for the Hell faction. Is that a conscious thought to reach out to these indie developers and go, let's work together, let's help each other and come up as indie?
I mean, we announced after Kickstarter what our third-party licensing policy is. 3 levels. 1, it's something that is Weird World War 1. Go ahead, do it. It's not like we could stop you. We are going to be cheering you. Level 2, compatible with Trench Crusade. It's we just look at it, say, oh, that's cool. That would look great on Trench Crusade. You can put it on your material that we consider this to be compatible with Trench Crusade. For example, what's the site that allows you to do your own miniatures in a software and then they print it for you? What's the name of that place?
Isn't it Cult 3D? Is it that one? Cult 3D?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, no, it's a big one. Anyway, we have several deals like that in place. You keep everything, and then the 3rd level, full collaboration, like with Westphalia. Let's work together properly. We will help to push it to all of Trench Crusade fans. We will write the rules. We will write most of the lore. It's because we obviously want it to be canon. It's important to some people. We will advertise it and we'll come up with some kind of a deal. It's because obviously if we put a lot of work to it, but it doesn't really work that we reach out because our company is tiny. Like all these people consider tiny indie companies. To us, they are staff-wise, they are huge. Like somebody tells me we have 6 staff. I go, oh my God, you're so much bigger than we are. We are very small, so we don't really have these departments that can reach out. I mean, this is the people are contacting us through Grapevine. You have to our company is really, really, really small. I think we have 4 full-time employees and 1 part-timer, and that's it.
And I think it's the amount of work and the amount of content and also just the community outreach that you guys have managed to do. And, being a part of building the world of Trench Crusade is a massive undertaking for anyone. But, for a small team like yourselves, it's a huge undertaking that I can't imagine doing myself. So, hats off to you.
Remember also, all of us had a full-time day jobs on top of it for most of this.
I think it has to be one of those things that's a passion project for you, doesn't it? I mean, you wouldn't invest that amount of time into something like this, and that also goes back to how much success you guys have got, because people can see that clear passion coming through. And yeah, I just think that, hats off to you for all the work that you guys have done. So I think we're coming up to about the time that we said that we have. So I mentioned about a wild speculation round, if we can indulge in that for a little bit.
Sure.
Can we talk about the theory that Andromalius is the leader of the Templar Metamorphosis? And could the temple be on level 9, or is that not something that you're looking at talking about? I know that every one of the major hell factions is led by one of the fallen angels, or at least it has a strong connection to them. It makes sense to me, given some artwork I've seen from Mike, that Andromalius would be quite closely tied to the temple. Is that a fair assessment?
Not in a sense like the Mike when he's doing cos. Well, we obviously all the factions start from different points. Like Trench hosts came from a fan conversion project. Sometimes I write a piece of lore, and that inspires Mike and James. Sometimes Mike does his sketches and just puts like a single words and the throws ideas at me. Remember, it's Mike is a humongously creative person. He's not a writer. He's an artist. So he throws stuff at me, but this is a very sort of back and forth. There isn't honestly that much detail yet done for the temple, and we are also strongly thinking that maybe it's the Andy Chambers should be the designer tackles, because Andy is now working with. He can only give us a 1 day per week because he's in so much demand. But I think Andy would be. Could bring some new ideas. But to answer your question, you are not quite right, but mainly because we just haven't delved into that level of detail. Mike, is the person who's worked on the temple thus far. Remember, he's a visual designer. He looks at the strong visual grasp first. But again, it's not the only way to do things. So let's see how it ends up.
Okay, yeah, that's probably, I think, one of the factions that I'm the most interested in, because they are so weird. They're like reverse moths. They just stare at a darkness rather than light, and they seem such an interesting concept to me. But I can't wait for more lore in them, and I also want to find out exactly what happened at the Battle of Absalom with Saint Dominica, there's Weehander and stuff like that, and all these little hints and teasers that are through Mike's work and through your own writings and the lore. That's something that I'm really looking forward to seeing. So one thing that I'd also like to touch on is, could we be seeing something like a Mongolian faction where it's like Genghis Khan, that sort of thing? Could we be getting cavalry coming into the game? I know that we've had the hints with the Iron Sultanates, Sipay Ottoman on cavalry. Could a cavalry faction be something that might be, or a sub-faction might be something that you're interested in?
Oh, interested, yes. I mean, I always read cavalry in skirmish games, especially in the trench warfare. I mean, as you might remember, they really things didn't go very well for them in the First World War. The rules of the cavalry in skirmish games often ends up being incredibly fiddly and requiring you to paint both the foot and the mounted model and the remembering a lot of things. Westphalia did experimental homebrew rules for cavalry and the bikes, which I thought were fun. I wouldn't take the exact same approach simply because I really tried to keep the rules, to distill them to their essence if I can. But I think in the end we have to do at least the Polish hussars. I don't think we can be that is too tempting. We really want to do the winged lancers. So the winged hussars. So Yes, but we are not rushing into it. It's the in the Mordheim, as you might have noticed, I just made a flat rule that the no horse can enter the building and no horse can climb ladders and the and such, because boy would it get difficult to try to figure out where do you fit the base. Is the how do you deal with the horse? Is the climbing ladders or ropes and the I mean, in real life, you obviously don't. You don't use horses in urban skirmishes for multitude of reasons. But some form of cavalry in the future, yes, but the not yet.
Okay, and so last two things, I am aware we're running out of time a little bit here, but can we talk briefly on the Cult of the Lamprey? Is that something that you could dive into a little bit? We've seen art from it. Is it something that might be coming up for the game?
No comment yet on that, I'm afraid. It's I'm not gonna open that door yet.
Okay, no problem. And then the last thing I'd like to talk about, again, another artwork thing. We spoke about the Primus Est Apostolic, which is just a huge floating, looks like a demon thing, and Mike mentions it's the first apostle. It's screaming first heads and things like that. And that got me thinking about, could that be, and you probably haven't gone into this much depth on the Paladin lore yet, but I was thinking, could that be the traitor Paladin? And if it's the first apostle, is it hinting it's Mary Magdalene? If it is the traitor Paladin, does that mean that the Paladins are the apostles? And, then that opens up this whole can of worms of, well, I imagine that every communion that is taken from the level of the divine. So, if, for example, the Metachrist take communion from Christ and they become the Metachrist, Paladins take communion from them, become the Paladins, and then the communicants are a lesser version of the Paladins because the Metachrist have been doing so much communion over the hundreds of years, they're ruined now, and it has to be mixed in and with chemical enhancements, which is why they are such a lower power level. So that Primus Est Apostolis artwork got me thinking so many different wild theories, and I'd just like to know if there's anything we can touch on with that at the moment. Again, you don't need to indulge all the crazy ideas I have, but yeah, if there anything you can give us to that.
I enjoy all the speculation, and we are we are not the going through the details of the Metachrist project is the anytime soon. This is something where we will reveal small pieces. It's your ideas are not completely out of question. It is indeed true that the communion program is tied to the Metachrist project and the creation of what we would consider superhuman people. The artwork in question is older, and we are right now talking how exactly it fits in our lore. But it isn't it isn't tied to Paladins. I don't think it's the fallen Paladin. We've actually had quite a fun. It's the doing brainstorming, but we haven't finished that line of thought. But yes, the artwork is part of the Trench Crusade universe. How it is tied exactly, that is still kept under wraps.
Okay, no problem. And then, so yeah, the last thing, so the last question has come from another YouTuber. I won't say his name at the moment. And it's not just about Trench Crusade. And it's who is your favorite primarch in Warhammer 40,000? Why is it Rogel Dawn? And when do you think he's coming back? And
actually, my favorite one, I'm gonna be super boring. It's Sanguinius. That's because of the great artwork in the Slaves to Darkness Realm of Chaos book. It's the Winged Primarch was one of the first things of 40k I ever saw. So it's deeply impacted my career. I think outside, of course, you always have your first love. Outside of this is the Jagadai Khan, because I just love the idea of the Mongol Marines and the scarred is the Mega Genghis Khan Primarch. So I'm afraid Rogal Dawn isn't my flame. It's the I think that the Sanguinius is maybe it's an archetype, but that's why he appeals to me. It's the I think the Blood Angels are a very sort of pure idea, and it shows you often have your strongest ideas in the beginning, not always, but often, and you can see why Blood Angels is one of the first and one of the most enduring chapters.
Yeah.
And now I'll have to go and feed my family in a second.
No problem. Thank you for coming on today. I just want to, once again, I am baffled as to why you would come on such a small podcast, the first episode, and I'm beyond grateful you've done it. I'd love to have you on in the future if, I've not completely put you off the idea. And thank you very much to all the people that have put in comments and questions to you. I'd like to thank them as well. Is there anything you'd like to say before we head off and go?
Just to everybody, we are just getting started with the Trench Crusade.
There is much bigger things than have come before are coming in the future. Like, we have not been idle. It's I think the fan base with the support and backing and enthusiasm and passion has really spoken to us, and we are going to put the support you've given us into a very good use for the future.
All right. Well, with that, thank you for coming on the podcast, and to everyone, thank you for watching. I'll see you all soon. Have a good day.